Hello and welcome back. Many people have asked me about how I did the foam work for the windows and for the columns and a couple of the entryways. So I put together a short video, a consolidation of some of the photos that I took and an explanation of the processes. So go take a look. Most projects that I do start out with research. And in the case of the columns for Snow White Scary Adventures, I referenced images that I had taken at Disneyland, and from those images I drew a scale drawing using graph paper that I print out. And each square represents an inch, and the larger squares represent a foot. So if it works on the paper, it will work in real life. And from the drawing, I made a wooden framework and wrapped that with foam. Then I took two 9-inch strips of paper and wrapped them around the column, and I marked the edge of the paper, and those marker lines would become the valleys of the ribs on the column. And now it's in this image you can see where I've removed material using just a regular handsaw, and the valleys are sanded to a concave profile using a cardboard tube that was wrapped in an aggressive sandpaper. The column was then smoothed with sandpaper, and then in certain areas a light coat of joint compound was applied that would fill in any of the imperfections that arose from the foam. Now, this is just the beginnings of the caps, the top portion of the columns. The majority of that was cut with hot wire and sanded to the proper profile with different shaped sanders. They were essentially just blocks of wood with sandpaper applied, so that you could just rub the foam and then it would become that profile. The bases of the columns were also formed around a wooden framework. The foam was cut like staves of a barrel and applied around the wooden framework, then sanded smooth. A recess was cut into the base of the column, and that's where the heart and the dagger detail would go. A piece of MDF was then applied. It was bent into the curvature and marked then with the proper layout of these foam pieces to where they would be applied. The moldings around the perimeter of that cutout were also foam. The dagger, this is the two hilts, the heart, and then the reference photo for the heart. And this is the final product with the reference photo below. Now this is the application of Ultracal. Ultracal is a type of plaster. It's a hard plaster, and it was just brushed on, allowed to dry, and then any minor imperfections were either sanded smooth or filled with joint compound, and then that sanded smooth. This is after the application of a layer of primer, which will illuminate any imperfections that need to be addressed, places that need to be filled or sanded better. This also gives a good base for the final paint. This shows the column in place, testing the fit against the wall. You can see the coating of the Ultracal. These columns were shaped differently. I used a hot wire to remove the bulk of the material, and then various sanders and cutters were used to get the final shape of the column, which was then cut in half. Molds were made, and then those were filled with concrete. These are the columns that are on the right and the left of the main door for Snow White Scary Adventures, the tall arched door. The molding around the entryway for Mr. Toad's Wild Ride was made by using several slices of foam that were profiled to the appropriate profile for the molding using a hot wire. They were glued in place. Then a hard coat was applied to the outside, and then the fake joints were then cut, and that's what the blue is. That's cut through the hard coat into the foam. This is after the final coating of hard coat plus a layer of primer. That also illustrates the columns on the bottom that are still in blue. Those were Dow Corning foam as well. This is after hard coating and prior to paint. The hot wire tool that I have is something that I made as well. The bow with the hot wire plus the power supply. And the power supply is inside of an old computer power supply box, and it allows the variable temperature, so you can have different types of wire or different lengths of wire. So that is appropriate for the particular foam that you're trying to cut or the size of the object that you're trying to trim down. This is some molding that was cut with the hot wire. I put templates on the ends of the foam that act kind of like bookends, and you just drag the hot wire across the template. Whatever the template is shaped like, that's what the resulting foam will look like too. This is the same piece of molding with a layer of modified thin set applied. After that was cured, a layer of joint compound was applied and then sanded smooth. And this is another example of hot wire cut molding. This was for the molding for Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. And this is a section of various angles adhered together and ready for hard coat. This was dry fitting some of the foam, just to double check its fit prior to its final finish. Now these, because they're out of reach, they don't have to be very strong, only appear to be made out of something more resilient like stone. So I used an orange peel joint compound spray, sprayed that on, then added a layer of joint compound just in a random fashion, and then sanded that smooth. And then that gives the appearance of it being like stone. Some of the moldings were made with an abrasive wheel. I made a couple of different profiles using my lathe, and then I took that wooden profile, covered it with epoxy, sanded the epoxy smooth, and then applied an abrasive. Then that tool was put in my drill press and used in a similar fashion to a router bit, but it would just wear away the foam and leave the same profile as the tool. And these are the window frames that were made using that technique. These are not meant to be very strong because they go in two of them go in a bedroom that in case of fire or something, the window can just be pushed out. The other two are not meant to be necessarily touched, so here again, it was unnecessary to make them out of wood, so I opted to just use the foam that I already had on hand. It was faster and worked out just fine. Now these are the same frames in place just to check the fit. Making the bay window sections for Mr. Toad's Wild Ride was a slightly different process. I still used the dense Dow Corning foam, and instead of manually running it through the hot wire, I set up a pulley system with a string and a counterweight, and when you released the weight, it would pull the foam at a constant rate through the hot wire, which results in a really nice, smooth, and even cut. This is a different hot wire setup. This was for making the joints for the windows, and a template was temporarily screwed into the foam, and then this hot wire is vertical, kind of like a bandsaw or a jigsaw, but the hot wire just doesn't move. But you just run that hot wire along the template, and it'll give you the appropriate profile. And there it is in place, ready for glue. Now these windows are also not necessarily meant to be touched, so this is a finer spray of joint compound with another layer of joint compound randomly applied, and then that was sanded smooth to give the appearance of rock as well. A tool tooled rock. And these windows, ultimately, what I initially planned on doing was making a mold of the windows and then casting them in fiberglass or concrete or a plaster or something like that. But these, since being in place, have received no damage. They're perfectly, they're strong enough for where they are. So if they do ever receive any damage in the future, then I'll consider removing them and making a mold of them.
Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.